Hello, this is Angelique, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to kind of try and help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. Last time we were talking about how motor development occurs, maturation, and context. And we were talking about how, you develop from inside out and, top to bottom. So we're going to pick it up from there. Motor development and perception. Sensory perceptions allow infants to learn about their environment so they can navigate in it. Motor experience sharpens and modifies their perception of what will happen if they move in a certain way. They perceive in order to act and in order to perceive. This bidirectional connection between perception and action gives infants much useful information about themselves and their world. So they're little scientists. They're trying to figure this all out, and by acting on their environment, they learn what they can expect. Visual guidance, the use of the eyes to guide the movement of the hands or other parts of the body. So if you're going to do any kind of work that involves like your eyes and hands, like sports, excuse me, bless me, Lord, artwork of any kind, manufacturing of any kind, your eyes need to be looking where your hands are going, unless you don't have sight and your hands get trained to doing that without your eyes. So this is something that children need to develop and tweak over the years. A visual cliff, an apparatus designed to give an illusion of depth and used to assess depth perception in infants. So it looks like there's a part that is solid, and then there's a part that's glass, and then the underneath is the same as the part that's solid. So to them, it looks like if they go this way, they're going to fall off. This cliff, it's not really a cliff, but, the goal is to see whether they are like, and hesitant, or they just come on over. Depth perception, ability to perceive objects and surfaces three-dimensionally, because we need that in our environment. If you've ever had your eyes dilated to the point where you're hitting stuff with your hand, or, had some kind of impairment where, you're not 3D with it, that's a problem. Because we don't live in a two-dimensional world, we live in a three-dimensional world, so you're going to have to be able to interact with your three-dimensional environment. Haptic perception, ability to acquire information about properties of objects, such as size, weight, and texture, by handling them. And that's how all babies learn. They handle things, and they figure out, what is it about these things? How much is, like this ball is squishy and light, this ball is heavier. Why is that a thing? But they're not ready to figure that part out yet. We have to teach them that. But that is how babies figure things out. Eleanor and James Gibson's ecological theory. How do crawling babies decide whether to try to cross a muddy patch or climb a hill? Crawling and later walking require infants to continually perceive or size up the fit or affordance between their own physical attributes and capabilities, such as arm and leg length, endurance and strength, and the characteristics of the environment. Is a moving ball close or far away? Is it low enough to catch? Is the ground too rough to walk on? So, affordance is the fit between a person's physical attributes and the capabilities and characteristics of the environment. And that's why, it's important to be aware of these things. If you're doing drugs or taking alcohol, you kind of lose this ability. We've all seen the videos where somebody does something that clearly they were not physically up to doing. The fall videos and the weird jump videos and all that stuff. You know what I'm talking about. But affordance kind of is there to help you see. I don't think I can jump that. That's too far for me. I don't think I can jump that. Or that's too high up. I don't think I can climb that high to get that kite out of the tree or whatever. Affordance helps us to keep safe. It kind of is our assessment of what we're capable of and what this feat requires of us. Ecological theory of perception, the theory developed by Eleanor and James Gibson, which describes developing motor and perceptual abilities as interdependent parts of a functional system that guides behavior in varying contexts. Because we need to behave in certain ways in each given situation. And so our brain has to be able to figure that out, perceive what's going on, and then act accordingly. So this is a process that we develop over time, from the time we're born to the time where we're old enough that we're on our own, and even when we're old people. And that's where some affordance will come into play there, because at a certain point you're no longer able to do everything that you used to be able to do, and you have to be able to figure that out for yourself so you don't hurt yourself. Cultural influences on motor development. Although motor development follows a virtually universal sequence, its pace does seem to respond to certain contextual factors. A normal rate of development in one culture may not be in another. African babies tend to be more advanced than U.S. and European infants in sitting, walking, and running. In Uganda, for example, babies typically walk at 10 months as compared with 12 months in the United States and 15 months in France. Asian babies tend to develop these skills more slowly. Such differences may in part be related to ethnic differences in temperament. And also, these children are held all the time. They want to get down sooner. They're allowed to get down sooner. Whereas U.S. babies are more coddled. Like I said, we put them in the playpen, we put them in the crib. We're trying to keep them safe. We put them in the walker. So we're trying to keep them safe from their environment as much as possible. In other countries, the babies are swaddled, against the mother, and they aren't let down until they can actually start walking. So that comes a little later for them. In a Native American culture, there was the cradle board, where the child was wrapped up and swaddled and, carried along until the child could, walk for themselves, and keep up. So it all is relative. It all depends on, the way you were raised, and that's the way you're going to raise your children for the most part. Each generation learns a little bit more, so we do change things as we go along. Okay, let's see. Cognitive development during the first 3 years. Well, the thing they're talking about here is Doddy Darwin, the naturalist's son. So we're going to go into that a little bit. But here's a little poem. So runs my dream, but what am I? An infant crying in the night? An infant crying for the light? And with no language but a cry. That was by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So, he put some thought into that, On December 27, 1839, when the naturalist Charles Darwin was 30 years old, his first baby, William Erasmus Darwin, affectionately known as Doddy, was born. That day, 20 years before, the publication of Charles Darwin's De Origin of a Species, which outlined his theory of evolution based on natural selection, the proud father began keeping a diary of observations of his newborn son. It was these notes, published in 1877, that first called scientific attention to the development nature of infant behavior. What abilities are babies born with? How do they learn about their world? How do they communicate? First non-verbally and then through language. There were among the questions Darwin sought to answer, questions still central to the study of cognitive development. Darwin's keen eye illuminates how coordination of physical and mental activity helps an infant adapt to the world, as in this entry written when Doddy was 4 months old. Took my finger to his mouth, and as usual could not get it in, on account of his own hand being in the way. Then he slipped his own back, and so got my finger in. This was not chance, and therefore a kind of reasoning. In Darwin's notes, we can see Doddy developing new cognitive skills through interaction not only with his father's finger, but with other objects as well. The diary depicts a series of encounters which reflected images. In these episodes, Doddy gains experience and knowledge, not in sudden bursts or jumps, but through gradual integration of new experience with existing patterns of behavior. In Darwin's view, as later in Piaget's, this was not merely a matter of piling new knowledge upon old. It involved an actual transformation of the way the mind is organized. When Doddy at 4 months saw his likeness and his father's in a mirror, Darwin noted that the baby seemed surprised at my voice coming from behind him, my image being in front. 2 months later, Doddy apparently had solved the mystery now. When his father, standing behind him, made a funny face in the mirror, the infant was aware that the image was not real and therefore turned around to look. At first, this newfound understanding did not generalize to other reflective materials. 2 weeks later, Doddy seemed puzzled to see his father's reflection in a window. By 9 months, however, the boy realized that the shadow of a hand made by a candle was to be looked for behind, in the same manner as in a looking glass. His recognition that reflections could emanate from objects behind him now extended to shadows, another kind of two-dimensional image. Darwin was particularly interested in documenting his son's progress in communication. He believed that language acquisition is a natural process, akin to earlier physical expressions of feelings. Through smiling, crying, laughing, facial expressions, and sounds of pleasure or pain, Doddy managed to communicate quite well with his parents even before uttering his first word. One of his first meaningful verbal expressions was "ah," uttered when he recognized an image in a glass. So, Darwin was figuring this out with his own kids. So, there are people, I don't even want to even discuss your opinion on Darwin. He was a scientist who did figure out a lot of things, and there are people who, don't like him for whatever reason. Usually it's a religious thing. But, he did a lot of work, figured out a lot of things, and, we're all the better for him being around. Studying cognitive development, classical approaches. The behaviorist approach studies the basic mechanics of learning. It is concerned with how behavior changes in response to experience. A psychometric approach seeks to measure quantitative differences in cognitive abilities by using tests that indicate or predict these abilities. The Piagetian approach looks at changes or stages in the quality of cognitive functioning. It is concerned with how the mind structures its activities and adapts how the mind structures its activities and adapts to the environment. I'm telling you, just getting it from here to here sometimes is hard to do. Behaviorist approach, basic mechanics of learning. Babies are born with the ability to learn from what they see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and they have some ability to remember what they learn. Of course, maturation is essential to this process, but while learning, theorists recognize maturation as a limiting factor. Their main interest is in mechanisms of learning. And this is how, they figure out things. Like I said, I like to watch little people and watch their wheels turn as they're figuring stuff out. That's, pretty cool in my opinion. And behaviorists study classical conditioning and operant conditioning. We learned about that before, where, they're trying to teach and they want to see how this is learned. And, the classical conditioning is more, a certain way, and the operant conditioning, is a different way. And so they get into all that stuff. And then habituation is another form of learning that information processing researchers study. We're not going to get into all that because, if you want to be a researcher, you need to go figure that out and learn it for yourself. Classical conditioning, learning based on associating, where they're going to tell you anyway, a stimulus that does not ordinarily elicit a response with another stimulus that does elicit the response. And operant conditioning is learning based on reinforcement or punishment. An Indian snake charmer's son eagerly plays with a snake the father has trained, showing that fear of snakes is a learned response. Children can be conditioned to fear animals that are associated with unpleasant or frightening experiences, as little Albert was in a classic study by John B. Watson and Rosalie Raines. Remember, they made him scared of the little fuzzy things, and, we don't even know if they ever unconditioned him. So there were some, problems with this study. Infant memory. Can you remember anything that happened to you before you were 3 years old? The chances are you can't. This inability to remember early events is called infant amnesia. One explanation, held by Piaget and others, is that early events are not stored in memory because the brain is not yet developed enough. Freud believed that early memories are stored but are repressed because they are emotionally troubling. Other researchers suggest that children cannot store events in memory until they can talk about them. So there's still different theories there. But as we know, when you're born, your brain is not fully wired yet. So it might just be that you're not fully wired enough to start remembering things yet. That's kind of the common, acceptance now of how that works. Babies 2 to 6 months old can remember after a hiatus of 2 days, so 2 weeks, that they were able to activate or make a mobile move by kicking. They show this by kicking as soon as they see the mobile. So they have short-term memory. They can remember from, what happened a couple days ago for 2 weeks ago, but after that, there's some slippage there. So, they do have the short term, and as they get older, the long term is going to kick in. And when you get really old, your long term is going to be better than your short term. That's why our older folks talk about their heyday back when they were teenagers and forget about what they had for breakfast. So, the brain, what are you going to do? Let's see, let's skip the page now. The psychometric approach, developmental and intelligence testing. When Darwin, at 4 months, figured out how to get his father's finger into his mouth by moving his own hand out of the way, he showed intelligent behavior. Intelligent behavior is goal-oriented and adaptive, directed and adjusting to the circumstances and conditions of life. Intelligence enables people to acquire, remember, and use knowledge to understand concepts and relationships and to solve everyday problems. So, we need intelligent behavior or we never get anywhere in life. Now, we don't even get into some people who just choose not to use it, but, let's see. Intelligence quotient tests, IQ tests. Like I said, we've all probably taken one of those. Psychometric tests that seek to measure intelligence by comparing a test taker's performance with standardized norms. And then again, like I say, there's only averages, Testing infants and toddlers. For school-age children, intelligence test scores can predict academic performance fairly accurately and reliably. Testing infants and toddlers is another matter. Since babies cannot tell us what they know and how they think, the most obvious way to gauge their intelligence is by assessing what they can do. But if they do not grasp a rattle, it is hard to tell whether they do not know how, do not feel like doing it, do not realize what is expected of them, or have simply lost interest. And I used to know psychologists, and they said they wouldn't psych test children under 3 because of these reasons, that there was just no use. It wasn't accurate, and so, when people would come with a 2 or 3, they'd be like, no, just sit on that till they're older, and, we can figure that out. And here is some tasks in the Bayley scales of infant development. So for some of you parents who might be worried, at age 1 month, on the middle scale, their eyes should follow a moving person. And on the motor scale, they should lift their head when held at the shoulder. At 3 months, they should be able to reach for a suspended ring, and they should be able to turn from back to side. At 6 months, they should be able to manipulate a bell, showing interest in detail. They should be able to turn from the back to the stomach. At 9 months, they should be able to jabber expressively, and raise self to a standing position. At 12 months, they should be able to pat a toy in imitation. They should be able to walk alone. From 14 to 16 months, they should use 2 different words appropriately. And they should be able to walk upstairs with help. Age 20 to 22 months, they should name 3 objects. Jump off the floor with both feet. 26 to 28 months, they should be able to match 4 colors. They should be able to imitate hand movements. At age 32 to 34 months, they should be able to use past tense, and they should be able to walk up the stairs alternating feet. And 38 to 42 months, they should be able to count, and they should be able to walk downstairs with alternating feet. And again, you have to teach them. Don't just throw them out in the wild and expect them to figure everything out. It's your job to teach them. Yes. So let's see. Assessing the impact of the home environment. Intelligence was once thought to be fixed at birth. We now know, as discussed, that it is influenced by both inheritance and experience. What characteristics of the early home environment may influence intelligence? Using the home observation for measurement of the environment, or HOME for short. Test trained observers rate on a checklist the resources and atmosphere in a child's home. And like I said, social workers might come out and do that if they think that there's a problem with your child's cognitive or physical development. Socioeconomic status, parenting practices, and IQ. The correlation between socioeconomic status and IQ is well documented. Poverty can curb children's cognitive growth by limiting parents' ability to provide educational resources and by exerting a negative psychological effect on the parents and their parenting practices. As the New York study sample mentioned in earlier, poor children were less likely than non-poor children to be exposed to developmentally enriching materials and experience. Another longitudinal study suggests how specific aspects of parenting associated with SES can influence cognitive development. So again, if parents are poor, they're having to work a lot. And then they also have to take care of the home. So they're not going to have the opportunities to enrich their child's life. Their parenting practices might even be to let an older child put the kid to bed or give him a bath or whatever. And of course, that limits the experiences that a child has with an adult, and they want to learn from us. That's just the facts of life. They want that mom or dad or whoever's there to be paying attention to them, not something else. And, that's just a sad fact that if the parents aren't doing that, then that limits the child in that learning space that they're in. Early intervention. If an impoverished home environment can lower intelligence scores, can early intervention raise them? Research suggests that it can to some extent. Early intervention, the systematic process of providing services to help families meet young children's developmental needs. And it's defined under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, a systematic process of planning and providing therapeutic and educational services to families that need help in meeting infants, toddlers, and preschool children's developmental needs. Developmental priming mechanism, aspects of the home environment that seem necessary for normal cognitive and psychological development. And like I said, in some homes that might not be present now, we talked about, individuals with disabilities. Not all disabilities, of course, are from poverty. There are mental disabilities that are just a fact of either biology or affect, depending on what's going on in the home. Fostering competence. Findings from the Harvard Preschool Project, from studies using the home scales, and from neurological studies and other research suggest the following guidelines for fostering infants and toddlers' cognitive development. In the early months, provide sensory stimulation, but avoid overstimulation and distracting noises, because the child is trying to learn about their environment, figure things out. And we all know if you overstimulate a baby, the head goes away. It's like, oh, and then sometimes they even will throw up a little bit, depending on how far you went with that. As babies grow older, create an environment that fosters learning, one that includes books, interesting objects, which do not have to be expensive toys, and a place to play. Respond to baby's signals. This establishes a sense of trust that the world is a friendly place and gives babies a sense of control over their lives. Like I said, if you're putting the kid in the other room, letting it cry out, what you've taught your kid is the world's an unfriendly place that is not going to get their needs met. Whereas if you respond to the child and take care of the child, what they're going to realize is the world can be a friendly place. They can get their needs met in it, and they will have a more optimistic outlook on life. Give babies the power to effect changes through toys that can be shaken, molded, or moved. Help a baby discover that turning a doorknob opens a door, flicking a light switch turns on a light, and opening a faucet produces running water for a bath. Give babies freedom to explore. Do not confine them regularly during the day in a crib, jump seat, or small room, and only for short periods in a playpen. Baby-proof the environment and let them go. Now, again, that's where you can do that safely. If you have a home, you have a lot of stuff, you have pets, you got to be a little more careful. But you can also give the children toys. And like I said, if you can get one of the old cribs like we had back in the day, where it's pretty much huge, as big as your dining room table, and they can pull up on it and stand and walk around, that's even better. They've shrunk the crib to where it's basically the size of a, little portable bassinet, and, what good is that? Talk to babies. They will not pick up language from listening to the radio or television. They need interaction with adults. And you can tell them what everything is. You can tell them everything they're touching, everything you're doing. That's what I just described. If they were in there watching us, describe what I'm doing. In talking to or playing with babies, enter into whatever they are interested in at the moment, instead of trying to redirect their attention to something else. Because that's how they learn. And like I said, what you're more interested in, you're going to be better at. You're going to learn more about. Arrange opportunities to learn basic skills, such as labeling, comparing, and sorting objects, say by size or color. putting items in sequence, and observing the consequences of actions. Applaud new skills and help babies practice and expand on them. Stay nearby, but do not hover. And we all know there's some parents that have that problem. And then they say, you know, I can't do this, can't, you know, you get the toys out for the kid, you describe what it is, what's going on, and then let them do their thing. You know, you don't have to stand over them, and I have relatives that don't have children, they were well-meaning, who want to say, no, that's not how you do this. This is how you do this. This does this. This is a cow. It says this. And, you know, they took the fun out of it for the kids. So they weren't super into playing with these people because it was no longer fun. It became a chore. It's like, no, you can't play with it the way you want to. The dog can't jump up on the roof of the barn. He runs around behind it and barks. No, you know. So don't take the fun away from it for the kid. It doesn't have to be perfect the way they play. It doesn't have to be what you think it is supposed to be. Let them play and explore, and that's how they learn. Applaud new skills and help babies practice and expand them. Like I said, it's great when they look at you like, hey, did you see what I did? And you go, yay! Oh my gosh, that was great! And then they're like so happy that they did this amazing thing, you know? Stay nearby, but don't, you know, again, hover. Let's see. Read to babies in a warm, caring atmosphere from an early age. Reading aloud and talking about the stories develop pre-literacy skills. Like I said, when you're reading a story, you can interact with it emotionally and talk to them about it. It's like, oh my gosh, how would you feel if that happened to you? Or, you know, I wouldn't have done that. What I would have done was this. What do you think? You know, and that can get them to thinking about it and get them more interested in reading. And that will, you know, make their life better. Use punishment sparingly. Do not punish or ridicule results of normal trial and error exploration. And really with a toddler, you don't even need to punish them. You can say, okay, that's enough. And you can go take them and put them in their bed. Because really, at that point, they're not going to understand. They're just going to understand the emotions involved with it. Because remember, we said the brain's not fully wired yet. So until they're a little older, probably, you know, 3, 4, 5, they're not going to get it anyway. So there's no use in punishing a child that's, you know, 2, 1, sometimes even 3. You're just wasting your time. Just remove them from the situation and solve the situation. And then when they've calmed down, they can come back out. And again, you should never make fun of your child. I see some of these videos where the kid's doing something and they mess up and they look and then the parent laughs at them. I just want to go smack those parents because they're being jerks. A child has to learn. And if you're making fun of a kid for normal trial and error stuff, what you've just done is lower that child's self-esteem. Because now they're thinking, oh, I didn't know that. I guess I should have noted they laughed at me and made fun of me, so now I feel bad about myself. So, you know, if you're doing that, you're a jerk, and it's not a funny video. Those of us who know a little better just think you're a jerk. So, I'm going to leave you on that note. And I hope this helped you to figure out a little bit more of why you do what you do. Until next time.